In the heart of a sprawling city, Mark lived a life many envied. A successful businessman in his late 30s, he had everything: a lucrative career, a sleek apartment in the city center, and a network of friends who admired his achievements. Yet, despite his outward success, there was one thing Mark yearned for: true love. He had always believed that love would come in the form of a grand, passionate romance, but it never did. His past relationships had been short-lived, plagued by misunderstandings, incompatible goals, and the constant pressure of his demanding job. Then came Lisa. Mark first met her at a mutual friend's event. She was elegant and mysterious, with a soft smile that immediately captivated him. There was something about her, an aura of quiet confidence, that made her stand out in any crowd. They spoke briefly that night, and he felt an instant connection. But there was something odd about her. She didn't seem interested in the usual small talk. Unlike others, she didn't ask about his career or his accomplishments. Instead, their conversation flowed naturally, like two people who had known each other for years, even though they had just met. Over the next few weeks, Mark found himself thinking about Lisa more and more. They started seeing each other casually, meeting for coffee or walking through parks, where they talked about everything and nothing. Lisa seemed to enjoy the simplicity of their time together, away from the distractions of the world. She was different from any woman Mark had ever dated. She was calm, collected, and almost always in control of the conversation. But there was a certain reserve about her. She never shared much about her personal life, and Mark respected her boundaries. As the days turned into weeks, their relationship slowly blossomed. Mark was falling for Lisa, but something inside him told him she wasn't fully opening up to him. She would disappear for days without explanation and return with an air of mystery that only deepened Mark's curiosity. He never pushed her for answers, respecting her need for space. Still, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was more to her than she let on. Lisa, on her part, seemed content with the arrangement. She never pressured Mark for commitment or made any demands. She enjoyed their time together. When they were together, they were present in each other's lives, and when they weren't, she was distant, almost like a shadow. She never asked for gifts, never brought up her past, and never made any declarations about the future. For Mark, this was the perfect relationship. It was uncomplicated. She was beautiful, intelligent, and everything he had been looking for, yet something always held her back from fully embracing their connection. As Valentine's Day approached, Mark found himself overwhelmed with emotions. He realized he wanted to take the next step with Lisa, to build a future with her. His love for her had grown in ways he hadn't anticipated. He wanted to show her that he was serious about their relationship, that he could offer her the stability and commitment she seemed to crave. Mark spent weeks planning the perfect proposal. It would be romantic and intimate, just the way Lisa would appreciate. He booked a table at a high-end restaurant, ordered a special custom-designed ring, and even arranged for a surprise moment when he would get down on one knee. He could picture it perfectly in his mind. The look on her face when she realized just how much he loved her. But as the days leading up to Valentine's Day ticked by, Lisa's behavior began to shift. She seemed distant, almost preoccupied, and Mark couldn't help but wonder if she was sensing something was about to change. He didn't know it yet, but Lisa had been carrying a secret of her own, one that would soon unravel everything he thought he knew about their relationship. For all of Mark's dedication to their relationship, Lisa had been playing a dangerous game of her own. While she seemed to lead a life of mystery, she was also carefully crafting a web of deception that Mark had no idea existed. Lisa wasn't just romantically involved with Mark. She had been carrying on a secret affair with someone else for over a year. The man was Jake, a childhood friend of Mark's, someone who had known Mark for as long as Lisa had known him. To Mark, Jake was just another friendly face in their social circle, someone he trusted without question. But unbeknownst to him, Jake and Lisa's relationship had grown into something far more complex and intimate than he could have ever imagined. Lisa's life had always been shrouded in secrecy, but it wasn't just for the sake of privacy. It was part of her carefully constructed world. She had always been cautious about getting too close to people, especially men. Her past had been messy, filled with toxic relationships and emotional wounds that she worked hard to hide. Mark's calm and steady nature had attracted her, but it was Jake who had stirred something more passionate in her. Jake was impulsive, a risk-taker, and full of energy. With him, Lisa could escape from the careful boundaries she had set for herself. He made her feel alive, untethered, and free, even if it meant betraying someone she once considered a friend. The affair had started innocently enough, an old connection rekindled after years of separation. But over time, the lines between friendship and desire blurred, and what began as a casual rendezvous turned into a full-blown secret romance. Lisa found herself torn between two worlds. On one hand, there was Mark, stable, reliable, and offering a life of comfort and security. On the other, there was Jake, who brought out the wild side of her that she had long since suppressed. It was a dangerous game she played, one where she had convinced herself that she could keep both relationships separate, never allowing them to overlap. However, as the months passed, the tension grew. Mark's feelings for Lisa deepened, and he became more serious about their future. He started talking about marriage, bringing up plans for the future in subtle ways. Lisa listened, but deep down she knew she wasn't ready to make a choice. She didn't want to let go of either man. She wasn't ready to sever the connection with Jake. Yet she also didn't want to lose Mark, who represented everything she thought she wanted: stability, companionship, and a life that was predictable and safe. As Valentine's Day approached, the pressure intensified. Lisa had to decide how to handle the growing demands of both men, knowing that her secret was on the verge of being exposed. But she wasn't ready to confront that reality. She thought that if she could keep both relationships on their separate tracks, she could avoid the heartache and complications that would come with a confrontation. Lisa was scared. Scared of losing both men, scared of revealing the truth, and scared of being caught in a lie that would tear apart everything she had worked so hard to maintain. In her mind, the plan for Valentine's Day seemed like the perfect way to manage it all. She had convinced herself that she could play the part of the loving girlfriend to Mark, knowing full well that Jake had been planning to confront her that evening as well. What she didn't realize, however, was that Jake had his own agenda, one that was far less forgiving than the secret she had been keeping from Mark. Both men had been unknowingly preparing for the same day to make their move, and neither would be prepared for the shocking events that would unfold when their worlds collided. Valentine's Day arrived, and Mark was filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had carefully planned every detail of the evening, wanting it to be perfect for Lisa. In his mind, it was going to be the culmination of everything they had built together, a proposal that would seal their future, a step into a life full of love and promise. He had the ring, the flowers, and the reservation at one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. It was a setting that seemed tailor-made for romance, with its candle-lit tables and stunning view of the city's skyline. Mark felt confident that this moment would be everything Lisa had ever wanted. As the evening unfolded, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Lisa had arrived dressed in a stunning red gown, the kind of dress that seemed to make time slow down whenever she entered a room. She looked breathtaking, but her usual warmth and joy seemed to be replaced with a quiet, almost distant demeanor. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Mark couldn't help but notice the subtle tension in her movements, the way she kept glancing around the restaurant as though she were expecting someone. Her behavior didn't make sense to him. After everything they'd shared, he thought she would be as excited as he was about this moment. But instead, there was a coldness to her that Mark couldn't ignore. Still, he tried to dismiss the unsettling thoughts in his mind. The waiter arrived with their first course, and Mark attempted to make light conversation, hoping to lift her spirits. But Lisa's responses were short, distracted. She was there, but not truly present. Mark assumed it was just nerves. After all, she had never been the type to wear her emotions on her sleeve. He told himself that she would open up once the proposal was made. Finally, as the meal came to a close, the moment arrived. Mark had planned it down to the finest detail. He signaled the waiter, who discreetly brought out a champagne flute with the ring carefully placed inside. and Mark took a deep breath, ready to ask the question that had been weighing on his heart for months. He knelt down, ring in hand, the warm glow of candlelight reflecting off the diamond as he looked up at Lisa. But the look on her face was nothing like what he had imagined. There was no joy, no shock, no excitement, only a look of hesitation that chilled him to the core. "I can't do this, Mark," she said, her voice strangely calm, almost distant. Mark froze. His heart dropped into his stomach as her words sank in. The entire restaurant seemed to blur around him as he struggled to understand what was happening. This wasn't what he had planned, not even close. The look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. She wasn't just rejecting him in this moment, she was rejecting everything they had built together. The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. The woman he had loved, the woman he had trusted, was now pulling away from him in the most public way possible. "Lisa, what's going on?" he asked, though the words barely formed. His mind raced, trying to process the situation, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. But Lisa's expression didn't soften. She didn't offer an explanation, just a shake of her head. The silence between them stretched on, and the quiet murmur of the other diners filled the void. The tension in the air was palpable, and Mark felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. What had gone wrong? He had done everything for her. Everything. The room around him felt suffocating. Mark could barely hear the clink of glasses or the chatter of the other patrons. All he could focus on was Lisa's face, pale and unblinking, as she turned her gaze away from him. She couldn't even look him in the eye. He stood up slowly, the ring still in his hand, and placed it back into his pocket. The world seemed to have shifted on its axis, and Mark didn't know how to bring it back. He excused himself to the restroom, his mind racing in a haze of confusion and hurt. As he walked away, the sound of his footsteps echoed loudly in the empty corridor. He needed answers, but the fear gnawing at him told him he wasn't going to like what he was about to find. Meanwhile, Lisa sat alone at the table, her gaze far away. The rejection wasn't just about Mark. It wasn't just about the proposal. There was something else, something deeper that she wasn't ready to face, something that would soon be revealed, and it was going to shake their world in ways neither of them could imagine. Mark returned to the table, his thoughts a swirling mess of confusion and disbelief. Lisa hadn't moved. Her hands were clasped in front of her, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere far off in the distance. The moment felt frozen in time, as if the entire world had paused just for them, trapping them in a place neither of them wanted to be. Mark didn't sit down. He just stood there, the hurt and disappointment weighing heavily on him. He could feel the questions pressing against his chest, but he didn't know how to ask them. The fear of what Lisa might reveal kept him frozen. He had imagined this moment for so long, but he had never considered that it could end like this. So suddenly, so coldly. "Lisa, please, what's going on?" Mark's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of all the emotions he had been bottling up. "Why would you say that? We've been together for so long. I thought you felt the same way." Lisa didn't respond at first. Her fingers played nervously with the napkin on the table, and Mark saw the faintest tremor in her hands. She opened her mouth to speak but hesitated, as though choosing her words carefully. When she finally looked at him, there was a vulnerability in her eyes, but it wasn't the vulnerability of someone who was about to confess their love. It was the vulnerability of someone caught in a lie, struggling to keep their balance. "I've been seeing someone else," Lisa said, her voice almost inaudible. Her eyes darted to the side, avoiding Mark's gaze. It was as if she could not bear to face him as she confessed the truth. Mark's chest tightened. The words hit him harder than the proposal rejection. "What?" he asked, though he had heard her clearly. He just couldn't believe it. How could she be seeing someone else? How long had this been going on? The questions seemed to rush at him all at once, but there was no time for answers. The hurt was too overwhelming. Lisa's face softened, a look of regret crossing her features. "I didn't want it to be like this. I didn't want to hurt you. But I've been confused. Mark, I never meant for it to go this far." Mark sat down across from her, the room suddenly feeling too small. His stomach churned, and for a moment he thought he might pass out. He wanted to scream, to demand the details, but instead he just stared at her, trying to process what was happening. His mind kept replaying their moments together, the late-night talks, the quiet walks through the park, the intimate dinners. All of it had been a lie. He hadn't known. He hadn't seen the signs. "Who is he?" Mark asked, his voice steady but broken. Lisa took a deep breath before speaking again, her eyes flickering with something Mark couldn't quite place. "It's Jake," she finally said, almost as if she had been waiting for the question. "Mark, it's Jake, your best friend." The words struck like a physical blow. Jake. Mark's mind raced, his world shattering around him. Jake had been his closest friend for years. They had laughed together, confided in each other, and supported one another through life's ups and downs. But now that bond felt irreparably broken. Not only had Lisa betrayed him, but his own best friend had been part of the deception. "How long?" Mark asked through clenched teeth. His entire body felt like it was on fire, but somehow the numbness inside him kept him grounded. "A year," Lisa answered, her voice tinged with guilt. "It started before we really got serious, but it's complicated, Mark. I couldn't choose. I didn't want to lose either of you." The truth was too much to bear. Mark felt as though he were suffocating, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on him. His heart pounded in his chest, but at the same time his mind seemed distant, as if he were floating outside of his own body, watching it all unfold. You were planning to marry me?" Mark said, his voice barely audible. "And all this time you were with him?" Lisa nodded, her face flushed with shame. "I didn't know what to do, Mark. I didn't want to hurt you, but I didn't want to let Jake go either. I kept thinking I could handle both of you, that it wouldn't come to this." Mark stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't do this," he said, his voice breaking. He didn't wait for her response. He didn't care anymore. He needed to leave, to escape from the suffocating reality that had been his life for the past year. He couldn't be in the same room as her any longer. As Mark walked away, he heard Lisa's voice calling his name, but he didn't turn around. The truth had destroyed him, and there was nothing left to salvage. The night that was supposed to be filled with love and joy had turned into the most painful moment of his life, and nothing would ever be the same again. Mark didn't know how he managed to leave the restaurant that night. His legs moved on autopilot, carrying him away from the chaos that had erupted in the one place he thought would be the start of his future. The cold night air hit him like a slap in the face, but even the chill couldn't numb the raw ache in his chest. His mind was in a frenzy, replaying Lisa's words, trying to piece together the fragments of what had just happened. Everything he had believed about his relationship with her now felt like a cruel illusion. And Jake, his best friend, was part of the betrayal. He stumbled into a nearby alley, his thoughts spiraling. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and without thinking he pulled it out. The screen flashed with a text from Jake. "We need to talk." Mark's hands trembled as he stared at the message. He wanted to throw the phone against the wall, to delete everything that had connected him to his past life. But instead, he opened the message and typed a simple reply. "We're done." He hit send before he could think better of it. His fingers hovered over the screen for a moment longer, as if searching for something to hold on to, but nothing came. The message had already been sent, and with it, his past. The next few days were a blur. Mark went through the motions of life, but nothing felt real anymore. The faces of his co-workers, his friends, even strangers on the street, seemed like mere shadows to him. He couldn't bring himself to talk to anyone. Every time he tried to pick up the phone, the image of Lisa's face, her unreadable expression, would flash before his eyes. He could still hear her voice, soft and distant, as she had confessed everything. The affair with Jake, the lies, the betrayal. His apartment, once a place of comfort, felt empty now. The loneliness wrapped around him like a suffocating blanket. He couldn't bear the thought of going home and sitting in the silence that had replaced the warmth of his shared moments with Lisa. She had been everything to him, the woman he thought he would marry, the one he thought he could trust. And yet, in a matter of hours, she had destroyed it all. His trust, his love, and his future had been shattered. One afternoon, Mark finally picked up the phone to call his parents. He hadn't told them about Lisa yet, not the details, but they knew something was off. His mother's voice on the other end was soft with concern, and for the first time in days, Mark felt a flicker of something close to warmth. He told her about the breakup, about the affair. It wasn't easy. Every word felt like a weight lifting off him, but at the same time it felt like he was dragging the weight of the world behind him. His mother listened patiently, never interrupting. When he finished speaking, there was a long pause. "Mark," she finally said, her voice gentle but firm, "you deserve better than this. You deserve someone who loves you, someone who would never betray your trust. You need to take care of yourself now." Those words, simple yet profound, stayed with him as he hung up the phone. For the first time since the night at the restaurant, Mark allowed himself to acknowledge that he had been treated horribly. But he also realized that the most important thing he could do for himself now was to move forward. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but he couldn't let this define him. The pain wasn't going to disappear instantly, but Mark knew he had to rebuild, starting with taking control of his own life. It would take time to heal, to trust again, to love again, but he couldn't let Lisa or Jake have any more power over him. As the days passed, the numbness began to fade, and with it the clarity he had been searching for. He had been blindsided by their lies, but now he could see what he needed to do. He had to cut ties with the people who had betrayed him, and while the hurt would linger for a long time, it was the only way forward. Mark took a long walk that evening, breathing in the cool air, feeling a slight shift within himself. The world felt different now, but perhaps that was just what he needed. A new beginning. One step at a time, he would find a way to move on. There was a future waiting for him, even if he couldn't see it yet. And maybe, just maybe, he would find someone who truly deserved his love, someone who would never shatter his heart the way Lisa and Jake had. But for now, he was determined to take back control of his own life. It was the only thing he could do.